And many of these individuals who had been aspartame reactors have tested themselves 5, 10, 20 times, every time getting the same response. And then they realized that this was a legitimate cause and effect relationship.
The GD Searle Company, in the quest to get approval for their product, aspartame, they conducted a study on animals in which they fed some animals, like I said, low dose, medium dose, high dose of the product, and then they used control animals that supposedly did not get any of the product. When they submitted this to the FDA and the FDA looked at it, there was some question about the study. Well, one of the scientists, a neuroscientist, looked at some of this, and he saw a lot of red flags. He said there's some real questions here about tumors being caused by this product, particularly brain tumors. So they ordered a study to be done by the Bureau of Foods, which was the precursor to the FDA. And Dr. Jerome Bressler was in charge of this group to look through the research that had been done by G.D. Searle, and that's what the Bressler reported about. And this is the report here. And basically what it shows is that either a lot of purposeful shenanigans was carried on to get this product approved, or, as he states it, it was the world's worst research. They found that what they did is the animals that died after being fed NutraSweet, they didn't autopsy the animals right away. Some of them were not autopsied more than a year afterwards. And of course the tissues broke down and liquefied, and so they couldn't do proper studies on them, but they reported it as if they had, and they reported these as normal. They found that they were taking tumors and cutting them out and throwing them away and saying the animal was normal. They had animal tissues that had obvious tumors in it that were reported normal. They had, in one of the cases here that's reported, a lymph node that was enlarged. And this G.D. Searle pathologist reported it as a normal lymph node. When the scientists from the Bureau of Foods looked at it, they say it was an obvious lymphosarcoma, a highly malignant tumor. The notations about the testicular atrophy were not noted. There were just numerous things in this report that showed that, in my estimation, there was an effort to cover up what was being found so that they could get approval.
The bottom line was, here's the most tested product additive in history, an additive. Now, additive's important because aspartame was approved as a GRAS, G-R-A-S, I mean, it's generally recognized as safe product. In which case, unlike drugs, if people have reactions to it, it does not have to be reported to the FDA.
And what I found was really quite frightening, and that was that, yes, there were many studies in the literature which did attest to aspartame safety, but they were essentially all funded by the industry, either the NutraSweet industry or the diet soft drink industry. These were the individuals who sponsored, paid for the studies. There were independent studies, but virtually all of the independent studies, that is, studies which were not funded by the industry, virtually all of them did identify one type of problem or another with aspartame.
But now, after years of retesting this, most authorities agree, there's no question, that feeding MSG to animals produces this brain damage. It's not questioned any longer, it's a fact. There's even good studies to show that if you feed the pregnant animals the MSG, their offspring has impaired brain function, and when you measure the neurochemical analysis of the brain of the animal, it's impaired all the way through the animal's youth up until adulthood, and they never quite recover from it. The central mechanism that actually produces the destruction and damage to the brain is excitotoxicity. That's pretty well agreed upon now. The frightening thing is that we're adding tons of these excitotoxins to our food. either in the form of MSG or part of the aspartame molecule, which is aspartic acid, which is an excitotoxin.
Now, the amino acids are contained in food, but if you have protein, meat, fish, and so forth, there may be 4% phenylalanine in the food, but not 50%. And we simply, biologically, don't know how to react to this flooding of these enormous amounts of amino acids in the body, especially the phenylalanine, which crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's meant to protect against, biologically, against poisons and so forth.
It's also what's called a dipeptide. That is, it is two amino acids stuck together. One of those amino acids is something called phenylalanine. Phenylalanine is the building block for another important neurotransmitter called norepinephrine. So when you take in aspartame, you'll increase the availability of one and you'll decrease the availability of the other. You'll change ratios. And when you do that, when you change ratios of norepinephrine and serotonin, you certainly affect brain function. And this can lead then to mood symptoms, to panic symptoms in some people. It'll affect seizure threshold, which is why I think I saw the seizure in this initial patient back in 1985, and why I saw a lot of seizure activity in people who were taking in a great deal of aspartame.
They knew that this product, aspartame, with time breaks down into a product called diketopiperazine. Diketopiperazine chemically is closely related to a carcinogenic compound. It causes cancer in a lot of animals if they're exposed to it, and humans. So they asked the GD Cereal Company to do a separate study with the diketopiperazine. Well, when they looked at this study, they found some shenanigans as well. And one of the things is when you mix up the diketopiperazine with the animal's food, you have to homogenize it so that it's evenly distributed and the animal can't see it and avoid it. Well, I've seen pictures of the feed, and they left it in big clumps so the rats were eating around it, not actually eating the diketopiperazine. There was also evidence that they were giving the diketopiperazine to the control animals. And of course this came out because in the original study they found a 47-fold increase in brain tumors. In the diketopiperazine repeat study, they said, oh, well look, the control animals and the aspartame-fed animals have the same incidence of brain tumors. Well, when the neuropathologist looked at it, said, well, that's kind of strange because now your control animals have a very high incidence of brain tumors that's not naturally found in these mice. And then when they looked at the feed, they found out there were some mix-ups of the feed so that the diketopiperazine was being fed to the control animals. These are the sort of things that's in the Bressler report that the makers of NutraSweet would not like the public to know about, because it's very frightening. You know, when the pathologist, Dr. Adrian Gross, looked at the material as well, very well-regarded pathologist, and he looked at it and he was absolutely shocked. He said it's just an enormous increase in tumors, particularly the brain tumors. And of course that's exactly what we're seeing now, is this tremendous increase in brain tumors in this country, which is completely unexplained by the neurological profession.
When the body metabolizes, when it breaks down aspartame, you wind up with a small amount of methanol, which is wood alcohol. That in turn is broken down into formaldehyde, which the body cannot get rid of, the body stores. Now, the industry has made a big deal about supposedly the fact, it's not really a fact, but what they claim is that when you take in fruit, you take in more methanol. They don't add the fact that in nature, the methanol in fruit is bound to something called pectin. Humans lack the enzyme to split the methanol off from pectin, so it goes through the body without doing any damage whatsoever. The body doesn't get exposed to the methanol because it's bound to pectin. So even though there's more of it, it's totally harmless in fruit. But with aspartame, you have the pure, unadulterated, free methanol and then formaldehyde. It's a small amount, but the body can't get rid of it. It's a cumulative phenomenon. So we have very, very toxic products.
Interestingly, the day after Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, GD Searle submitted a request for approval of aspartame because it had been previously denied so many times. And the way this process works is they submit data that they generated, they funded, so clearly it's going to be in favor of their product. This data that's submitted to the FDA committee is not funded by the FDA. It's not independently financed. It's not objective. So the process is that this data is given to committee members who are typically scientists and researchers in the field. And this committee had 5 members. The committee reviewed this admittedly heavily biased and prejudiced data, but even with that, 3 of the 5 chose to vote not to approve it. So the process of a new president coming into office allows him to select new committee members and heads of committees. So President Reagan chose Dr. Arthur Hayes to head the FDA committee. So soon after Dr. Hayes heard that aspartame was not approved, he chose to appoint another committee member. This new committee member voted in favor of the approval, resulting in a tie. And Dr. Hayes had the authority to break the tie, and of course, he chose to approve aspartame in 1981, which resulted in a massive catalyst for its approval worldwide because many of the countries in the world looked to the United States as the authority, the leader in identifying safety concerns. So this was a massive historic event, and as you can see, it was clearly heavily manipulated by political influences.
Furthermore, the FDA impaneled its own panel to review the Public Board of Inquiry. 3 of those people were assigned, review the cancer part of the Public Board of Inquiry, the part that said you can't market it. Those 3 scientists, every single one of them said, we agree with the Public Board of Inquiry. These are 3 FDA senior scientists. We agree with the Public Board of Inquiry. They met with the commissioner the night before he announced that he was going to approve NutraSweet and begged him not to approve NutraSweet.
As you'll see documented in the 60 Minutes video below, in 1983, 2 years after the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Arthur Hayes, approved aspartame, he left the FDA under charges of impropriety. But what's really interesting is the day after he left, he was hired by the PR firm for GD Searle, the manufacturer of aspartame, at the compensation of $1,000 a day, or about $300,000 in 1983, which in today translates to about $1 million. So serious cause for reflection. Now, if you're only consuming aspartame intermittently or occasionally, it's probably not a big issue. More than likely, it's not going to cause a problem. But the fact of the matter is, it's the most widely used artificial sweetener. It's in over 10,000 products. They even have new names for it now. It's recently been called amino sweet. So it's every bit as dangerous as aspartame, and everything you've seen in this video applies to amino sweet. So if you're having soda, artificial soda, if it's anything that says no sugar, you have to be really careful and cautious and read the label because it most likely has aspartame. Or chewing gum is another one. So if you're consuming any of these products regularly, I implore you to do your research, to carefully analyze and evaluate. If you want more information, Corey Brackett has the Sweet Misery DVD, which is available, and it goes into more details. But clearly, this is information you're going to need to help you recover from the deception and the manipulation that is pervasive within the drug and the food industry. And these are the types of details that we want you to understand to help you and your family better take control of your health.